In our role as the nation's Association for State Arts Agencies, NASAA strives to know as much as we possibly can about the operations, programs, revenues, and practices of all of our members. Today, we're focusing on state arts agency revenue data. We take a great deal of pride in having the most accurate and up-to-date data on how states fund their arts agencies. This information helps states to know where they stand with respect to their peers, to understand different revenue sources, and to provide accurate information to the field about public funding for the arts. As you know, revenue data are also vitally important to state advocacy efforts. Reliable data is necessary when educating and informing stakeholders, constituents, and legislators. NASAA has long engaged in the collection and reporting of state agency revenue information. You've all seen it, the extensive reports that hit your inboxes twice each year. Today, we'll look at new ways our team is bringing the data in those reports to life. We'll see new data visualization tools that give state arts agencies and state arts advocates access to great information in compelling, informative, and highly visual ways. We hope that each of you, our members and our partners, find these new tools helpful to your efforts. And as always, our door is open for your feedback and opinions as we evolve this new work. With that, I'll hand things over to NASAA's Learning Services Director, Eric Giles, for some tech tips.
Great. Thank you, Pam. I'm Eric Giles, NASAA's Learning Services Director, and I'll be hosting today's session along with NASAA's own Research Director, Ryan Stubbs, and Research Associate, Patricia Mullaney-Loss. And now, to truly get the session rolling, here's Ryan. Ryan?
Thank you very much, Eric. So, NASAA surveys state arts agencies twice annually so that we can have the most accurate and current data for our members and their advocates. It's been a while since we've done a webinar centered on revenue data, but this information is foundational to our role in understanding state arts agencies. The detailed work we put into data collection not only yields annual trends, it gives us an understanding of the different types of revenues states use to fund their arts agencies, as well as an understanding of different budget processes across the nation. Our presentation today will focus on new interactive data visualizations, but I wanted to briefly share some highlights from our report. First, I mentioned that we administer a revenue survey twice annually. This is necessary because state revenue projections can be a moving target, and what is initially allocated for an SAA may change by the time the state's fiscal picture becomes clearer later in the year. To understand revenue data in a timely and accurate way, we publish preliminary data in the beginning of July, and we publish final data in the beginning of February. Today, we are discussing our most recent release, final fiscal year 2018 data, which were published earlier this month. This report contains in-depth data to inform budget discussions that are now underway in many states. So let's quickly look at a few top-line findings. State and jurisdictional arts agencies, or SAAs, reported $357.5 million in total legislative appropriations for fiscal year 2018. Total appropriations to states decreased by 2.4% in that time, and that's about $9 million between 2017 and 2018. Total per capita appropriations to SAAs decreased by about 3 cents, or to $1.08 per person in 2018. And still, total legislative appropriations remain about 20.5% below the all-time high reached in 2001, which was $449.5 million. And when we account for inflation, appropriations are actually 42.5% lower than they were when we received that appropriation in fiscal year 2001. So next, let's take a look at a percentage breakdown of SAA revenue sources for 2018. This will also help with the definitions of funding types as we go through the data. First, this entire pie is equal to total revenues received by state arts agencies. You see that a vast majority, or 78.1%, come from legislative appropriations. These are funds designated by the legislature in state budget bills specifically for the state arts agency. Now, 4.2% of the pie comes from line items, and these are funds designated by the legislature for other organizations or other arts organizations that pass through the state arts agency budget. Now, 7.1% of this are what we call their state funds. Common examples include percent for art programs, when those funds are transferred to an SAA from a state's capital budget, and funds appropriated to other agencies such as education, transportation, or tourism that are subsequently allocated to the SAA for arts-related programs or services. So combined, those three state funding categories make up 89.4% of total state arts agency revenues. Consistently over time, state general funds provide a large majority of total appropriations. In 2018, state general funds accounted for 78.2% of total state funds. Now, out of the total aggregated SAA revenues, 9.5% come from the NEA, and only 1.1% come from private funds or miscellaneous funds. So this gives us a picture of state arts agencies on the whole, but it's highly unlikely that the pie chart for your state looks the same. To give us a sense of the variation we saw between states this year, this table shows us a little bit more of that story. While aggregate legislative appropriations decreased by 2.4%, there were actually more states that increased funding as opposed to those that decreased. 10 states reported increases greater than 10%. 15 states reported flat funding, and 19 states reported decreases in total legislative appropriations. We also see that the median percentage change was actually 0%. So these numbers tell me that fiscal year 2018 was yet another year of relatively stable funding for state arts agencies on the whole. Again, these trends don't necessarily tell the story of individual states. That's why we've developed a new set of revenue dashboards that bring out those state-level trends. And with that, I will hand things over to Patricia to walk you through these new dashboards.
Great, thanks, Ryan. So as I start to share my screen, I just want to remind everyone that it'll be easier to view this demo by selecting full screen mode on your computer, and you can also use the zoom function to get a closer look. So I'm currently on NASAA's homepage, and to find all the dashboards we'll be covering, go to the funding page under the research tab. So on the funding page, we'll always have the most up-to-date revenue report, you can see here, as well as a whole section labeled dynamic data. And this will have all the visualizations I'm really excited to share with you today. So let's first look at this large map titled Per Capita Legislative Appropriations to State Arts Agencies. So let's say you want to know how your state's appropriation fares in comparison to those of other states in fiscal year 18. This map will do just that using the per capita calculation, which divides a state's appropriation by its population. Because every arts agency serves the entire state, we can see just how far these dollars go towards serving the whole population. Per capita figures also level the playing field so that we can compare states of various sizes. So on this map, you'll be able to select legislative appropriations including line items or excluding line items. And line items are just itemized funds that go through state arts agency budgets to specific organizations. So the per capita shading key here down below will also highlight states with similar per capita amounts. So we can see here are the states that have a per capita amount of under 50 cents, 50 to 99 cents, $1 to $1.49, $1.50 to $1.99, and then more than $2 in per capita funding. So this also kind of helps put your state in context with the rest of the country, so you can see states that can compare. You can also scroll along to each state to see the actual appropriations amount as well. So now that we've gotten just a quick general national outlook, we can move on to the state-specific Legislative Appropriations Explorer here at the upper left-hand corner. So I'm going to click on this. This dashboard offers a more in-depth look at appropriations for a given state. So if you just need to know some top-line appropriation figures or see some quick trends over time, this dashboard is definitely for you. I'll start by, let's see, selecting North Carolina. And here we see just some top-line figures. So we see the total legislative appropriation. Again, this includes line items going through state agency budgets for specific organizations. Then we have appropriations excluding line items, and this figure is actually useful since it better represents the funds SAAs have available to use for programs and operations. Then we have the total legislative per capita, which is again kind of what we saw on the map that you viewed. And then we have the per capita ranking. So here we see that North Carolina, their appropriation per capita is ranked 22nd out of 50 states in FY2018. And we have also right here included some definitional language on these 4 top-line figures, just in case anybody needs a quick refresher as they're going through this. Then I'll select Iowa. So while the top section can answer questions you may have about FY2018 appropriations, this bottom section can answer questions like, how have my state's appropriations trended over time, or how do they compare to the nation? These charts offer a lot more information than what we share in our annual report. So the first chart on the left shows appropriations for the Iowa Arts Council over the last 10 years. Here we included appropriations adjusted for inflation. So adjusting for inflation is pretty important because over time the value of appropriations decreases. It can be really helpful to communicate that the dollars you receive today do not go as far as they once did. So inflation-adjusted appropriations is in this light purple, and the dark purple is nominal appropriations. And you can scroll over these charts like I'm doing right now to get more information on how appropriations have changed over time. So as with most states, you can see that there's a gap, ever widening, between nominal dollars and adjusted dollars. So this is just showing that the value of appropriated funds does in fact decrease. The second chart displays Iowa's legislative appropriations compared to the national aggregate appropriations. Here you can see how your state differs from the national trend, and obviously these figures are really different, so you can use 2 different axes. So one here in purple is showing the state, and the one in orange is showing the nation, just for reference. And of course you can scroll over the lines to get the figures for every fiscal year. So that's basically an overview of this Legislative Appropriations Explorer. And I'm scrolling up to the top because in order to just get back to that dynamic data page, all you have to do is click on Interactive Visualizations. So now let's take a deeper dive into different types of funding state arts agencies receive. To do this, I'll click on Total Agency Revenue Explorer. So let's say we have some questions about a specific type of revenue an agency receives, whether you want to know how NEA funding has trended over the past decade, or how much an agency receives from other state funding in relation to other revenue categories. this is going to be the dashboard for you. So I'll select Oregon. And the bar chart here shows all the major categories of funding going through an NASAA budget. Let's see. Here, the top figure in red shows total agency revenue. Then, other state funds, which are state dollars from special accounts or transfers from other agencies. Then NEA funds, which includes the partnership agreement and any other funding from the NEA. Private and miscellaneous funds, which can include donations, corporate and foundation sponsorships, and earned income, as well as total legislative appropriation. So this bar chart is kind of like the pie chart that we saw for the whole nation when Ryan was doing some overviews at the beginning of this demonstration. Again, you'll always find a little bit of definitional language just to kind of help to navigate what you're looking at. So now I will click on Pennsylvania and show you these bottom three charts here. So these next three charts show some of the funding categories over the last 10 years. They include total dollar amounts as well as per capita amounts. So first we see total legislative appropriations. The lighter shaded in portion represents the total appropriation, and then the line represents the per capita appropriation over time. And then we have NEA funding, which has remained relatively stable over time. And again, this lighter shaded in area is the total dollars, and then the line is going to be per capita. And then we have total revenue over time. So again, what's great about these interactive dashboards is that we're able to include a lot more data than what you'd find in the report. And just as a reminder, you can always scroll over the tooltips to see maybe to just get a little bit more information than what you can kind of catch at a glance too. So without further ado, I will go back to our dynamic data page. And now we'll head to our Regional Explorer. So in the spirit of a little friendly competition, this dashboard compares your selected state to all other states belonging to the same regional arts organization. You may find benchmarking by region useful for your own purposes, but it also might come in handy when you need to educate lawmakers or citizen advocates. So, I'll select Missouri. And also, you see the state select function that I just selected Missouri with, but then you can also see that there are options for two different types of funding. So you can either compare states by total legislative appropriations or total revenue. So right now I'll keep it on total legislative appropriations as we go through this series of charts, but just to let you know that you still have that option. So the first chart shows actual figures of every state in the region for fiscal year 2018. So this is total legislative appropriations for every state in the region. Just a nice kind of quick at a glance chart. Next, we'll see how appropriations have changed over the last decade for Missouri and its neighbors. This chart shows us in nominal terms how a state has fared over time in relation to the rest of the region. The tooltips will share a little bit more information about the magnitude of change over the course of the years. And also just to let you know that anything below this 0 line right here means that appropriations are lower than what they were in FY 2009. So anything in this area is lower than in 2009. Anything below is higher. Next, we have a bubble chart comparing legislative appropriations per capita. So this is another great handy visual comparison of all the states in the region, this time using per capita amounts. And of course, you can always use the tooltips to get a little bit more information. And finally, we have per capita rankings over time. This axis goes from highest ranking down to lowest, and we can see how states have gone up and down in the national per capita rankings. This is a new way of looking at historical rankings that we've actually not ever highlighted before in visualizations or in our report. So it comes in handy. And I'm just going to scroll up and switch to total revenue just to show how that changes per capita amounts and rankings. So here now we see that Nebraska is actually a little bit higher than Missouri in terms of the per capita amount, and then of course a little bit higher in the rankings as well when we look at total revenue instead of total legislative appropriations. So this just shows you how you can customize the data in a way that's meaningful for your state. Of course, many find the regional divisions along RIO borders helpful, but definitely at NASAA can help you pull together some customized data if you want to look at other states for comparison. So please just always drop us a line if you want any of that. So for the last dashboard that I'll be showing you today, it's actually an update of a tool that we've had for a few years. The Raise Your Ranking tool allows you to estimate the appropriation your SAA would need to raise its rank. So say you want an appropriations increase and making the case that additional funding will get your state into the top 25, top 10, top 5. This may actually help you with your ask. And the chart that we're looking at right now will do all the calculations for you. Here you see the per capita appropriation ranking. So this is also what you can get in a table published in our annual report. But it's interactive. So I'm going to select, say, Wyoming. And say we want to get Wyoming to rank in the top 5. So we can select Wyoming, then choose whether we want to include or exclude line items. So I'm just going to leave it excluding line items. And then we can enter in an appropriation amount in order to change our rank. And in order to do this, I'm going to go down to this per capita ranking milestones. This is kind of weird, but this chart can calculate how much funding your state needs in order to get a certain rank. So again, we want Wyoming in the top 5. So we see to rank 5, you need a per capita amount of $2.26, which for Wyoming specifically will be a little bit over 1.3 million. So let's just put that in here. So here we've entered that in, and now we can see that Wyoming indeed ranks number 5. So you can really actually put in any appropriations amount into the calculator and, you know, have some fun with this. If only getting actual money were this simple. Anyway, so this concludes the 5 dashboards that I've showed you today, and I'm going to turn it back over to Ryan to help lead us through some Q&A.
Great, thanks so much, Patricia. That gives us a great overview so that folks can start digging into their own data. So I'm going to go through and see if we have some questions, and if you have a question, now is the time to fire it into the chat box. But there are a couple here that we can go over. So first, Patricia, are there other ways to compare a state's appropriations to other states that are not shown on the dashboard? I think you had them by region, but are there some other ways that you can look at comparisons to different states?
Absolutely. Well, I can definitely make any type of customized comparison. So, you know, any list of states can definitely be used, and I can create customized tables in order to look at a particular state's comparison to others. And you can also try to select, you know, different types of funding that you'd like to compare. For instance, in the dashboard, you see that you can compare total legislative appropriations or total revenue, but let's say you want to compare the sort of baseline legislative appropriation without any line items. I can also do that.
Great. So it sounds like there's all kinds of ways that we can do custom data slicing and comparisons, and that these dashboards are some ways to present them online where you don't necessarily have to have us do a custom poll, but that is all, of course, still available. So another question, and I think you touched on this, but Patricia, could you talk a little bit more about what's included in private and miscellaneous funds?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit of a catch-all category, but sources include individual gifts, donations, corporate support, foundation support, regional arts organization funds, any type of earned income, and also federal grants not coming from the NEA, so any other non-NEA federal grants, amongst a few other smaller categories. But that's also private and miscellaneous funds on the aggregate contribute only about 1% of total agency revenue, just to put that in perspective.
Great. So yes, a very small percentage of the overall pie going to private and miscellaneous funds. One other question here, I think that I can take this one. The question is, will you still be publishing the full revenue report? So the answer to that question for now is definitely yes. Aside from all the visualizations that you've seen here today, our full report is still online and available to anyone. That includes not only a overview of some of the trends that I showed at the beginning of this webinar, but also some of the detailed tables if you're more interested in looking at the full tables instead of the visualizations. That's just another way to learn. So yes, we think that bringing the data to life via visualizations is definitely helpful for more people and gets to more learning styles, but for now we'll still keep publishing that report. Okay, I am not seeing any more questions coming in, so we might be able to wrap up a little bit early. Let's give folks a second or two to get a question in if you have one. Now's the time. All right, I think we do have a question here from Matt Harris. Matt asks, are similar visualizations available for data older than 2009 to show budget trends over a longer period of time? Patricia, do you want to take that one, or do you want me?
Sure. Again, anything is customizable. We do keep a historic database, so all of that budget information is available. It's just a matter of, you know, what we like to put up, and we also want to maintain sort of a fresh take on the online resources that we have. However, if there's any particular range of dates that you'd like to see, I can definitely customize some charts and send them your way.
Great. And yeah, in our report and other things that we publish, we will often show that long-term trend. Again, you know, we show that the high point for state arts agency appropriations was in 2001, but we have data going actually all the way back to the late 60s, so we can actually show very long-term trends for state arts agencies. So all of those things are available. All right, another question here from Ardith. Ardith asks, or says that this would be a useful way to present data on the state level, showing, for example, grants by county or by art form. Can NASA offer training in how you use FDR data in Tableau to build data displays like these? Yeah, so I can take that one, and that's definitely something that we do. So one thing that some of you may be familiar with is that we've created visualizations and dashboards for every state that are looking at the location of grants with respect to county-level census demographics. So one way that we're trying to get that information out there is to hold separate conversations with each state. So if you've yet to have a conversation with us about those dashboards, we can definitely set that up. You can just get in touch with us. But I think that is a good way to enter into the conversation about how to use something like Tableau to visualize your grants data in addition to your appropriations data. All right, another question here. This would be a useful way to present data on the state level, showing, for example, grants by county or by art form. I'm sorry, this is actually the same question that was posted twice. On to the next one. All right, just scrolling down here a little bit. All right, so here's an interesting question. It's great to have this access to this data, but is anyone asking the question of why? For instance, for what states have we seen, or for states that have an increase or decrease, was there a common trend? What might be some of the reasons why we're seeing some of these changes in appropriations? Right, so yes, that's the million-dollar question. I would say that we are certainly interested in analysis that looks at different factors for changing appropriations over time. Given that we are highly familiar with these data and track it year over year, we see a strong correlation with state budgets and how state budgets and revenues are increasing or decreasing over time. So there's a strong correlation between how state budgets trend, and how state arts agency revenue trends along with that. And of course, we also know that state budgets will trend based on the business cycle and economic cycles as well, because those depend on how many dollars that the state is receiving, which is based on tax revenues, which are related to how the economy is faring. But state budgets usually lag a couple of years in how they trend from the economic trends. So usually if there's a downturn in the economy, it might take a couple of years for the state budget to react, or if there's an uptick in the economy, it may take another couple of years as well. So we see that as being a really strong correlation, and we've actually studied this a little bit. One thing that we've also studied that I won't go into in great detail, but we've tried to take a look at how state legislative appropriations fare with respect to political party. And I'll just say that overall, we see basically no correlation or evidence that government control by one specific party is going to yield many more appropriations for a specific state. So yeah, I think there's certainly more research to do into why some of these things trend the way that they do. There's different factors, and you know that it's really different in every state. And the overall trends that we show and that we report we're able to show some of those changes, but that story might not be the same in a particular state. And there may be a particular political story, there may be something going on with the state budget or something else. So it's an interesting question and something that hopefully further research will continue to shed light on. With that, I'm not seeing any more questions come through, so it may be time to wrap up. I just wanted to thank everyone for participating today. Thanks to Patricia and to Eric and to Pam. And with that, we will sign off. And as always, feel free to reach out to NASA staff with any questions or to request further information. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time.